Welcome to our presentation, Three's Company, Unpacking and Settling In with Three NIST Frameworks. Before we begin, we want to take a moment to introduce ourselves. I'm Christina Sams. I'm a lead cybersecurity engineer at MITRE, working cybersecurity risk management. Dave?
And I'm Dave Weitzel. I'm a principal cybersecurity engineer at MITRE. I've been doing cyber for a long time. Actually started as telecom, became cyber through the decades. I'm a techie with a law degree, so often live at the law technology nexus.
And hi, I'm Julie Snyder. I'm a principal privacy and cybersecurity engineer at MITRE, and I'm the privacy lead for our center that supports the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. And I've spent the last 22 years working in various areas of privacy and cybersecurity risk management for U.S. federal agencies and critical infrastructure industries, and in recent years have also been supporting other nations in building their cybersecurity and privacy capabilities. So today, during our brief time together, we'll quickly introduce you to MITRE, then dive into the topic at hand regarding three NIST cybersecurity and privacy frameworks and ways you can use them together. We'll spend time up front providing an overview of each framework before drilling down a layer into some of the core concepts in each of them. And then finally, we will walk through an example of how to bring those core concepts together in your organization. So just briefly, a quick note about the organization your three speakers hail from today. MITRE is a not-for-profit organization that operates federally funded research and development centers in the public interest to tackle challenges to the safety, stability, and well-being of our nation. And as a brief frame for our discussion today, the three frameworks we're discussing vary in terms of how long each has been available. They can each function alone, but you can get more benefits out of using them together. We'll show an example of what using them together can look like in the last section of our discussion. Let's start with a quick overview of the three frameworks. The cybersecurity framework was originally developed to help critical infrastructure organizations establish or improve their cybersecurity program. However, the cybersecurity framework is broad enough that it is beneficial for any type of organization, not just critical infrastructure. It was developed through a year-long public collaborative process. Version 1.0 was released in 2014, and version 1.1, the current version, was released in 2018. The cybersecurity framework includes a high-level privacy methodology, but privacy is now more robustly covered in the new NIST privacy framework. The privacy framework builds on the success of the cybersecurity framework in terms of a public collaborative process to develop it and the structure of the framework. Similar to the cybersecurity framework, the privacy framework focuses on programs. It also, in addition to that, though, focuses on how to apply privacy to products, systems, and services. And the first version of the privacy framework was released last year in 2020. And then finally, the Risk Management Framework, or RMF, was established to help federal agencies address cybersecurity risk. It's also widely used by private sector organizations. The RMF includes discussion regarding enterprise risk, though it is often applied at the system level. It was updated in 2018 to integrate the cybersecurity framework and privacy concepts. This was before the privacy framework was available. And use of these frameworks is voluntary for the private sector. A little more about the content in the cybersecurity and privacy frameworks. They follow the same structure. They each have a core that provides a three-layer menu, if you will, of cybersecurity or privacy activities and outcomes that organizations may want to achieve. The profiles concept describes ways organizations can use the core to determine the current state of their program, and in the case of privacy, also the state of their product systems and services, as well as their target or desired future state. Organizations and industries use framework profiles to customize their use of the core by aligning their mission and business objectives and values with the cybersecurity and privacy activities and outcomes that support those objectives and values. Implementation tiers help organizations review their programmatic capabilities to determine whether they have the right resources in place to achieve their desired state. And informative references are optional resources that can help an organization either implement new activities and outcomes or crosswalk their current practices to demonstrate how they relate these to the framework. Looking at the layers of the core in each framework, the top layer is called functions. Both frameworks happen to have 5 functions. The cybersecurity has identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The privacy framework also has functions for identify and protect. In addition to those, it has 3 different functions for govern, control, and communicate. And then the privacy framework points back to the cybersecurity framework for activities under detect, respond, and recover. These terms at the function level are intended to be broad enough that any risk management professional can understand them. They don't have to be a cybersecurity or a privacy expert to have conversations about privacy and security using these functions. This can be very helpful when you're trying to speak to others outside of your organization or your immediate cybersecurity and privacy program when it comes to leadership and the board. Functions are divided into multiple categories, which are groups of similar outcomes. So if you look in the diagram across the screen, you can see how the core breaks down with these functions into categories, and then each category has one or more subcategories, which are specific outcomes-based activity statements. And both frameworks have about 100 of these subcategories. Each subcategory points to what NIST calls informative references that can be used to facilitate implementation. The informative references are based on common or widely used standards, and we'll see some examples of that at the bottom of the slide. In the cybersecurity framework, the informative references are included in the document. NIST is in the process of moving to an online model for informative references, so the privacy framework informative references are available online. And then NIST is in the process of a new online informative references structure for managing the relationships and taking a deeper look at how its standards relate to each other, as well as other authoritative resources, including these frameworks. And then I do also want to point out in the cybersecurity framework, you see common standards like ISO, COBIT, COSO, and others. In the privacy realm, there aren't as robust sets of standards yet. And so in the privacy framework, you'll see primarily NIST standards, and then you'll actually see a few subcategories where there aren't yet standards identified. So Christina, with that quick introduction, I'll turn it over to you for the RMF.
Thanks, Julie. So as Julie briefly introduced earlier, this is the RMF from NIST SP 800-37, which provides a robust risk management framework for information systems and organizations, often applied at the system level for handling risks. The RMF is a 7-step risk management process with prepare in the center, and then starting with categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor to manage information security and privacy risk related to operating systems, and describes key roles and responsibilities that are part of managing risk within an organization. All steps in the RMF have purpose statements, tasks, and outcomes for each task. In the latest 2018 revision, NIST updated 800-37 to integrate concepts such as supply chain, privacy, and as Julie mentioned, the cybersecurity framework. These may be reflected through RMF tasks, document references, artifacts, or responsibilities. The new prepare step, the gray box in the center, brings in essential activities to help ensure organizations are ready to manage security and privacy risks when using the main 6 steps of the RMF. Prepare helps an organization be prepared to implement the RMF consistent with mission business objectives and risk management strategies from senior leadership. And this is just one of the ways the RMF now connects to the CSF. Organizations may already be doing some prepare activities, but adding it to 837 in 2018 formalized tasks that may have been vague previously. This graphic also provides a suite of NIST standards and guidelines in the blue and gray rings outside of the RMF steps that are available to help support implementation of the RMF. As I mentioned, each step in the RMF has a purpose statement, and this slide lists each of the RMF steps and captures the general purpose statement of each step. It's important to note that although presented sequentially, starting with prepare at the top and moving down to monitor, there is some flexibility in movement after the prepare step between the main 6 steps of the RMF. From categorize to monitor, the steps can be conducted in non-sequential order as long as organizations can still meet applicable requirements and manage risk. Steps may be carried out in a non-sequential order so that organizations can revisit a step as needed. For example, moving from implement back to select rather than going from implement to assess to ensure that the appropriate controls for safeguarding a system and managing risk are selected. At this point, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Great. Thank you, Christina. So we're now going to talk about framework profiles. You heard from Julie about framework core, and now the profile is an adaptation of the core for an enterprise or a group of enterprises, sometimes supply chain partners. So what is the framework profile? You have the core, so that's on the left. We discussed that. There's the privacy framework core. And then for profiles, you want to do an analysis of your current use of identify, govern, protect, and so on, down through the category and subcategory level, and that will develop an as-is profile. But what most importantly you want to do is to create a target profile. So get the appropriate stakeholders together and then walk through and identify, govern, control, communicate, and protect for the privacy framework, and identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover for the cybersecurity framework, and work from those 5 functions down through the categories to the subcategories, but align to the organization's goals, how it manages its data processing, legal and regulatory requirements, risk management priorities, and privacy needs. But most importantly, we're going to be tying this to the business functions of the organization, right? So we're going to talk about mission objectives. And the purpose of a mission objective is to start to tie that business logic to the cybersecurity framework and privacy framework. So a mission objective is the purpose of an operation of an industry or subsector or organization to the processes and systems it supports. So think of it as what business we are in. If you're used to enterprise architecture, it's the kind of stuff of a business reference model. And then you have to prioritize those missions. What is the most important thing that your enterprise does after we list those missions and to prioritize them? And then sometimes missions have dependencies. So do I need to do, I certainly need to do the HR mission objective if you have one to fulfill, making sure enough people are in the manufacturing, supporting the manufacturing mission objective or the transportation mission objective of your products and so on. So there's a lot of dependencies. So a number of the missions have that cross dependency. Now we're going to give an example of a profile we built along with United States Coast Guard in the oil and natural gas sector several years ago. What we have here is something we call a DAISY chart, because when we're identifying these mission objectives, we've determined through our work, it's best to have them in a non-linear manner. So when we're actually running a workshop, we draw a circle and we say, what business are you in? We have these conversations, and same with enterprise owners. So here we have some of the kind of mission objectives, and it becomes pretty apparent that these are top-level things that a business does: maintaining environmental safety and obtaining timely vessel clearance if you're going to go in and offload that oil. Bulk liquid transfer is the transfer of typically dangerous hydrocarbons to a shoreside facility. Making sure you have the HR requirements, a lot of rules and regulations under the Coast Guard on who's doing what and what roles and what training they have. Making sure that you don't do mischief with the product and maintain that quality of the product as it moves from ship to shore. Preparedness, making sure that you're ready for any kind of environmental or other concern. Operational security, you want to make sure nobody's doing mischief to these processes as they move. There's almost always a regulatory aspect to many businesses, so audits, inspections, regulatory side. And then we continually determine when we work with operational technologies, maintaining personnel safety, making sure that people aren't injured or die is part of the business function. So all of those safety controls are critical business objectives here that were identified in the bulk liquid transfer profile. And what do we do next? Well, here you see that DAISY again for bulk liquid transfer. We then map against the CSF, the cybersecurity framework, as Julie described, through the functions and the categories and the subcategories. Ultimately, that creates something there on the right that we call a dot chart. If you go through the 108 subcategories of Cybersecurity Framework version 1.1, that'll run about 10 pages if you can fit all of your mission objectives on one page. So you see there top left, the 8 mission objectives around the DAISY. You see on the right, you have the columns, 8 columns. So each one of those columns is one of the mission objectives. So I'll go through that with a little more specificity on the next slide. So here's the dot chart again. What you see is a scoring against these dots, where 3 dots is the high priority, 2 dots is a moderate priority. 1 dot is other implemented subcategories, and we have an X because sometimes in operational technologies, there's certain subcategories you need to be very careful of. There's no Patch Tuesday on an operational plant, so you need to be very careful of when you're doing port scans and stuff because you don't want to mess up pressure and heat and temperature and sensor fire suppression systems. You want to make sure that they're okay. So some subcategories you have to be very careful with. We see here in the top left of the dot chart, mission objective 1 in this case for the risk management strategy, IDRM1, has 3 dots for mission 1. So that's a strong candidate for doing that early. We see about 4 rows down, we have a couple of 2 dots, but they're in mission objectives 3 and 8. So probably not the highest priority if you haven't already taken care of the priority 3 for mission objectives 1 and so on. Over time, of course, you need to move through all of these from high, moderate priority to other implemented systems. Ultimately, you don't have a choice of whether you're going to implement all 108 subcategories. It's a question of timing and resourcing, and what you do next. And the creation of this profile helps you along those lines. If you've already have, and are we beholden to the 3 dot, 2 dot, 1 dot? If you have a regime that you might already use for prioritization in your enterprise, feel perfectly good to use that instead of this 3 dot, 2 dot, 1 dot regime. Now, how do you use a profile? So we've created the profile. So we have this customization of core for an organization, a sector or subsector. We fuse the mission and business logic. So as we say, the boardroom can talk to the server room. We have an alignment of cybersecurity requirements with the operational methodologies. Right? What cyber protections do you have in place? People, process, and technology. And how is that tied to those 108 subcategories of the CSF, and then aligned to those mission objectives, and the basis for assessment of a current and a target state, and a decision support tool for you to use in those governance processes. Now, for framework profile development, I'm not going to get into the details of this slide, but if you see that cloud, organization or community focused creation of a target profile, that's what we're focusing on here, the development of those mission objectives against that target profile. How do you do that? We have 6 steps here. Again, they're iterative, so get back to the beginning of this as you do it on a regular schedule as you evaluate that and use that against your governance of your cybersecurity investment. So then one last thing on profile development approach, I want to focus you to the bottom 2 boxes here, right? So creating the profile is nice, but we don't want it to be shelfware. We want to use it in our governance of our IT systems and IT security, and we want to be able to use it for cyber investment planning and allocation of resources and budgets. Because with these priorities, if I have a funding situation where I don't have this year's budget the way I expected, I can move things to the right. Or if I have a windfall and more budget available to me, we can move stuff and make the spend in this year versus next year. And this profile gives you the opportunity to do that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thanks, Dave. As a reminder, what I'll be doing now is I'll just walk through some assembling security and privacy controls. Now, as a reminder, this graphic shows the RMF, the steps involved in the RMF, and some of those guiding documents, standards, or publications that can help with the implementation of the RMF. From categorize through monitor, controls can have a role in the RMF. You can see where it's at select controls, implement controls, and they will be part of the example that Julie will cover later. So we'll spend the next few slides covering controls and how they can be used when implementing the RMF. So what are controls? Controls are descriptions of safeguards an organization puts into place to help protect a system and the information on that system and achieve security and privacy objectives. And they're selected and implemented to satisfy system requirements. And this example shows a control from the audit or AU family, specifically AU-4, audit storage capacity. The AU family is one of 20 families that are in NIST SP 800-53. And each family contains controls related to a specific topic, such as awareness and training, incident response, PII processing and transparency, or supply chain risk management, or in this example's case, audit. This slide shows a control structure, which all controls and control enhancements in NIST SP 800-37 follow this structure. This includes a control identifier, so again, that AU-4, that represents what family the control is a part of, the name of the control, audit storage capacity, and a discussion of the control. A control may have organizationally defined parameters in the base control or control enhancement language, and these are bracketed statements in that language that offer an opportunity for an organization to document specific content or details that may need to be identified as it relates to the control and help with that control's implementation. So now that we understand what controls are, what are baselines? So baselines are general sets of controls. All NIST security control baselines are based off of a set of assumptions such as systems exist in network environments and are general purpose in nature, and organizations have the necessary structure, resources, and infrastructure to implement the controls. In this baseline example, you can see those controls from the awareness and training family that are in the NIST security and privacy control baselines. In addition to security control baselines in NIST SP 800-53B, there's also a privacy control baseline. The new privacy control baseline helps an organization determine from a privacy programmatic perspective what security and privacy controls might be important to implement to manage privacy requirements and risks, and again, from a programmatic perspective. To know which baseline to start with, activities from the categorized step must be completed for determining the impact if there's a loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability, which are security objectives, as it relates to a system. This loss is expressed as having low, moderate, or high impact. And then these impact levels are represented by NIST as security control baselines and help serve as a starting point for systems. Note that not all controls are applied to the baselines. So once a security control baseline is selected, tailoring can then occur as part of the select step, specifically the task control tailoring in select. Tailoring activities include adding or removing controls from a baseline based on factors such as threats, type of system, what's needed to protect and manage risk to that system, addressing security requirements, and supporting mission and business needs. All tailoring decisions, whether focused on security or privacy considerations or based on issues such as cost and schedule, should be documented. And one form of tailoring includes overlays, which I'll cover on the next slide. So overlays are a set of controls for specific applications or use cases and can serve as a type of bulk tailoring. They can be used with or without baselines and are targeted for a very specific set of conditions, environment, type of technology, or information such as classified information, privacy, or industrial control systems. Overlays are typically the result of subject matter expertise or community consensus. Because baselines are developed for specific situations, they can provide more control specifications than baselines can, such as supplemental guidance for implementing controls, parameter values, or regulatory references that a control helps address. On this slide, the type of guidance and content that an overlay typically includes is on the left in the light green box. On the right of the slide is part of Table 3 from the privacy overlays and shows some of the security controls that privacy overlays include. Overlays may still require some tailoring, just like baselines, to ensure it's implemented accurately within a system and reflects any security or privacy needs. So now that we've spent a bit of time with the RMF and understanding controls and how they relate to the RMF, it's important to also understand how the frameworks can help implement the RMF. The RMF benefits from linkages to the cybersecurity and privacy frameworks because these frameworks do offer a more strategic view of risks an organization may have to consider while using the RMF to manage risks to systems. The frameworks are great for creating communication opportunities within an organization between, as Dave mentioned earlier, the boardroom and the server room, because the frameworks are based on language that doesn't require someone to be a cybersecurity or privacy expert, and this is critical to connect people and roles at different levels in an organization and share risk information and support risk-based decision-making. Profiles are helpful because they can help inform risk and resource decisions and RMF steps such as prepare, categorize, and select, and ensure RMF decisions align with risk management strategies from the organizational level. Having the strategic organizational risk management insights that the frameworks provide can help make implementation of the RMF at the system level more successful and inclusive of mission and business priorities through identifying, aligning, and deconflicting requirements so that the RMF doesn't become a checklist or compliance exercise. Moving to slide 27, we can see more specifically how profiles may influence each RMF step and activities within those steps. This table shows how each RMF step, from prepare to the main 6 steps of the RMF, again, categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor, is impacted by profiles and captures the link between information from a profile related to risk management priorities and helping with making informed risk management decisions throughout the RMF. Profiles help when thinking about questions such as where to focus and prioritize resources, how robust assess and monitor activities should be, and identify if there are controls to tailor during select to support mission and business needs. Profiles may help inform authorization decisions as well, providing an AO with information about organizational risk tolerance and how a system may be important to a specific mission or business objective. Without communication to understand senior leadership priorities or decisions, or without risk management at the organizational level, risk management at the system level can be challenging and can create gaps in information that could be critical to whether a system should be authorized to operate or not. The RMF in Revision 2 now includes references for tasks under each of its steps to parts of the cybersecurity framework, such as profiles. This is an example of an update to the RMF that further emphasizes the link between system-level activities with organization-level risk management activities and decisions, and highlights where the RMF and the CSF link. I'll turn it back over to Julie now.
Thank you, Christina. So let's look at how we can bring all of these things together. Imagine, if you will, that we're in an organization that has a mobility and logistics program. And as part of that program, we have a new system we're designing for dynamic flight routing. So we'll be moving equipment and also people with this system. And the system is going to use things like international navigation libraries, real-time air traffic data, current weather forecast, and crew and passenger information. And the whole purpose of this system is to optimize fuel and time in generating flight plans. So if you're the system owner or the system security manager, you're going to follow the RMF steps that Christina has walked us through, and you're going to land with a baseline that looks something like this. In case you don't have time to count all of that, that's 450 controls that you are now responsible for figuring out how to implement for this brand new system. And I know you can't read all of these. That's actually part of the point of this graphic, is to convey that sense of overwhelm that a system and program manager often feel when they're determining, oh my gosh, how do I tackle all of this? Because every program has limited resources. How do I do all these things? How do I prioritize all of these things? And how do I implement all this? But lucky you, your organization has done a cybersecurity framework and privacy framework profile. So you have some tools to help you with that decision making. So if we look at the next slide, this is an example from one of the Coast Guard profiles. So we're going to borrow for a moment from their oil and natural gas offshore operations profile. And in that profile, there's a mission objective called Maintain Continuity and Integrity of Operations. And this mission objective is about preserving the ability to operate at the intended level within the desired time frame. So pretty important if you're trying to plan routes and use real-time information and get people and things where they need to be on time. Seems like a pretty important objective. In this case, it was the number 4 objective out of 12 in terms of priority. So in the orange box on the screen, there's a slice of the subcategory priorities for this mission objective. So we're going to pull that thread a little further. Let's look at the asset management category under the identify function. In this case, for this mission objective, we identified 4 high priority subcategories and 1 moderate priority subcategory. So let's drill down a little bit further into what those subcategories look like. When we look at these 5 subcategories, we see that there are 11 different controls associated with those subcategories. So these are the controls that are going to help us implement our priorities that are articulated in this profile. Of these 11 controls, or of the 450 controls from your baseline rather, these 11 are going to be some of the most critical to implement because you know right away they're attached to your number 4 mission objective, which is pretty important in that pot of 12. So we know these are things that we need to give priority for. And so when you think back to some of the things Christina was talking about at the end of the last section, you know these are the controls that you may need to robustly monitor. These are the controls that you may need to robustly assess before you implement. And you can think through things like, as I implement these controls, can I rely on policy and procedures to implement them, or are they important enough that I really need to invest in a tool to do that? So of these 11, these are the important ones. And then another thing that I want to point out, so we identified 11 controls with these 5 subcategories, but one of those controls is in italics in the far right under subcategory IDAM5, and that control is ST6. That one's in italics because we realized in looking at our baseline, ST6 is not in our baseline. So when thinking about the tailoring process and is the baseline right or do we need to make some adjustments to accommodate our specific risk, we're going to look at whether we need to add SC6 to our set of controls. And then let's shift gears for a moment too and think about this from a privacy perspective. You can use the privacy framework profile in the same way. So in this system, we're dealing with passenger and crew data. So your profile and the decisions in your profile can help you reason through things like levels of identity assurance that you need for certain system processes, or identifying where you may be creating unintended records of patterns and location tracking. And so your profile will help you reason through those and identify controls to address those risks as well. So if you'd like to go deeper into this is a very quick example. We are doing a lab later today, Lab 4-T14, called Hands-on 3NIST Cybersecurity and Privacy Risk Management Frameworks, and that's at 12:45 Pacific. So back to our title of Threes Company. So we've unpacked these frameworks a bit, and hopefully we've helped you see that they are good roommates and can be good roommates in your organization, and helped you understand a bit about how they can successfully live together. So one of the key takeaways that we're hoping that you got out of this discussion is that risk management is not just a system level activity. It needs a connection back to enterprise risk and the priorities of your organization. So this keeps you out of the situation where you're doing cybersecurity things just for cybersecurity's sake or privacy things just for privacy security's sake. You've got that clear link back to how they connect to your organization's needs and purpose and mission and values. And then we talked at the beginning, and then Dave mentioned again a few moments ago about conversations between the boardroom and the server room. We really do hope that we've helped you see how these frameworks can be used together to facilitate those conversations and how profiles specifically can help knit those conversations together. So as you think about kind of a time scale, we've got a notional scale there on the bottom of what that progression can look like. So here you are today, understanding the 3 frameworks and their relationship. In a month, you can start building framework profiles and implementing RMF steps once you've got a handle on those frameworks. And then after you've got your profiles built, you want to think about current and target profiles. You can start applying those and the RMF concepts to connect your server room to your boardroom. And so we want to thank you for joining us today. And again, if you would like to delve deeper into these topics, please join us for Lab 4T14, Hands-on 3NIST Cybersecurity and Privacy Risk Management Frameworks at 12:45. Thank you.